So once again, I'm Trudy. I'm the founder of InsightLA, now just another one of the teachers there. And I'm here with my beloved husband, Jack, who is the founder of Spirit Rock Meditation Center.
Yes.
You want to add anything about?
I'm just happy to be here with you. I've also been part of InsightLA for these 20 years, since the very first board.
Jack has served on the board for almost 20 years.
Yeah. See.
That's true love. And that we weren't even, remotely connected as a couple back then. So that is definitely.
Anyway, I love the InsightLA community, and I'm really happy over here.
So make sure you're muted, everybody. Thank you. Oops, somebody's coughing. Make sure you're muted. Thank you. Little mute button. Thank you. So today, I want to bring up a topic that we all usually rather avoid, but it's really central to all meditation practice and most spiritual traditions too, which is awareness. And Ava, there's still people waiting to come in. Awareness, you have to keep an eye on it. Awareness of death and dying. And I also, just before we begin, I want to thank our moderator, Ava. This is her first time really doing the whole moderating, and she gets to have hundreds of people for her first day. So thank you for that. Just keep an eye out on people coming in, and yeah, we'll help you if anything comes up. And also I'm speaking to you, we are speaking to you from the unceded lands of the Tongva tribes, the indigenous people who stewarded this land for hundreds and hundreds of years before we ever got here. So I want to acknowledge that we are here now and they were here before. And this actually, it does fit in with this theme of impermanence and change, and nothing lasts forever. So what we'll do, for those of you who are new to Sunday Sitting Group at InsightLA, we'll have about a half an hour of meditation, and I'll do just a bit of guidance during that meditation, maybe a little more today, but plenty of room for silence too, for those of you who find that guided meditations interrupt your the thinking and the stories you're engaged in. We'll have plenty of time for silence. So we have about a half hour of sitting, and then we have sitting or lying down or standing, whatever posture you may be in. And then we have about half hour of teachings, which Jack and I will share. And then some time for any questions or reflections that you may have, some time for dialogue with each other. So that is our time together. And I want to invite you now to find a comfortable framework for your body where you can be, relatively still for the time that we're meditating together. Closing your eyes if you're comfortable doing that, lowering your gaze if not. And I like to begin with the sound of the bell and inviting you to listen to the sound as it is born, as it appears, and then has its being as sound, and then vanishes. Because we begin to see, actually in every single experience, this activity of life arising and passing away. So I begin always by taking a few deep breaths, just breathing in the presence and aliveness of this moment. And with the out breath, relaxing as much as you can, just releasing any tension there may be in the body, in the mind, in the heart. And once again, breathing in and out. And one more time. And just letting the mind and the heart settle here in the body. And feeling the movement of the breath in the body. And I understand that focusing attention on the breath or the body may not be comfortable for everybody. So please do whatever helps you stay present. Stay with this moment of your life as it unfolds into this next moment. Bringing attention to the sounds of life around us. And that includes the moments of quiet, the silence. And if it's comfortable for you, you can gently rest your attention with this movement of the breath. Just tuning into the ebb and flow of breath and the sensations that may be happening in the body. And noticing too how each sensation appears and then morphs into another one. How each sound arises and then disappears. And as we meditate together here today, right now, we're really studying, observing, becoming mindful of the birth and death of experience, moment by moment. You can notice how a breath is born. It begins, it has its being, its life, and then it passes away. The same is true for all experience and for each one of us. And noticing too how awareness, how mindfulness itself appears and disappears. Very present with this moment, the sounds and sensations and thoughts and feelings, and then whoop, carried away. Into remembering or planning. And then that moment of noticing again, oh, lost in thought. Attentiveness too appears and vanishes, reappears. Just noticing when there's presence of mind and heart, when there's a kind of absence. The ebb and flow of each one. When you notice that you've maybe lost in thought, just gently move your body back, just maybe an inch. Just stepping back into this posture of receptivity, poise, and balance. Receiving this moment, receiving what's happening, not tipping forward, leaning out toward the next moment, but gently stepping back into relaxing and receiving this one just as it is. And whether you're sitting, standing, or lying down, this stepping back, this backward step is, of course, not literal. It is a kind of shifting back, moving the body literally back, maybe just a half an inch, and feeling that shift into the relaxation of receiving what's happening. Receiving what's happening with a kindly spirit, maybe the spirit of a grandparent, kind of loving awareness. And breath by breath, thought by thought, sound by sound, sitting together like this, stabilizing, steadying our minds and hearts, so we can begin to see how each breath, each sound, each feeling, each thought is born and passes away. Appears and disappears. Arises and vanishes. Just, just beginning to see how all of life, all of meditation is this rhythm of appearing and vanishing, making room for each experience, making room for another. In this great space of mindful, loving awareness. Thank you. So I think that given everything that's happening in the world right now, this topic of just looking at the role of death and dying and our awareness of that, it just feels very timely. And there's lots to say. I've been studying this matter for decades, and we'll just share with you a little bit this morning and then further in the weeks to come, because I want to make room for our honored guest today. And I was inspired by several things to bring this up today. One of them being my cousin, Myra Goodman, who some of you may have met when we taught together last year when her book came out, Quest for Eternal Sunshine. She wrote a memoir about her father. Both parents were Holocaust survivors. And she wrote a memoir about how her father overcame really lifelong depression and the residue of that trauma to find happiness and a really strong spiritual life. But Myra has always been terrified of death and imagining the worst that could happen to her kids, to her loved ones, just really being scared. And she tried to confront her fear of death. She said she wrote in her newsletter, she tried to confront her fear of death about 20 years ago when she was a Zen student, and she went to a workshop that was offered by her local Zen center. But the teacher encouraged everybody she led them through a Buddhist death awareness meditation where they were told to visualize their bodies rotting and going through all these stages of death, becoming bloated and blue and the flesh rotting away, and then being a skeleton held together by tendons, and finally a pile of bones scattered like dust in the wind. And she became so terrified that she fled. She got so anxious. And she said it's taken 25 years, but she's finally gotten curious as she approaches, well, she's younger than we are, but she's beginning to approach the age that we are, and deciding that, hey, it's time to make friends with this, to understand this. And it reminds me of teaching my friend and colleague, Catherine Klatzker, and I taught for 10 years retreats on being with death and dying for professional healthcare workers. And always we would teach a meditation called the 9 Contemplations of Atisha from an 11th century Tibetan Buddhist teacher. Because in the Tibetan Buddhist meditation tradition, you begin by doing exercises and meditations to begin to desensitize yourself to the fear of dying, and to begin to develop an emotional acceptance of the fact of our mortality. And this was so important for the healthcare workers, because how can you be with people who are critically ill or dying? And how can you be present with them if you haven't faced your own mortality? And because, you know, a lot of them talked about getting busy with technical things, or just having trouble just facing a patient who is dying. One of the things that helped Myra come to terms, and I want to give a shout out for my friend Larry Rosenberg, who is the person who taught me to meditate for the very first time when, I don't know, this was like what, 45, I don't even want to think about how many years ago it was, when we were living in a communal house together in the, I guess, early 70s. And Larry has written a beautiful book called Living in the Light of Death. This book helped Myra a lot. And Ava, maybe you could put that title in the chat for people. It's a really good book. And the other book that helped her a lot that I want to recommend to you is written by our friend Mirabai Bush with Ram Dass. And it's called Walking Each Other Home by Ram Dass and Mirabai Bush. And both of these books really helped her understand. Larry talks about the concept of using death as a life coach. You know, now there are lots of life coaches who can help people figure out how to live their best life. And he talks about how death can be a kind of life coach, because when we can recalibrate our priorities and really ask ourselves what's most important in our life, when we realize that it's not forever. There's a sense of just having all the time in the world, and that's a very beautiful thing, and we don't want to lose that sense. But can we hold that sort of relaxed, spacious sense of just being here, with also the understanding that we are not here forever? And we can see this breath by breath, moment by moment. We can see this in our life. And we can see how, you know, each thing that ends makes room for the next thing. One of my Zen teachers said that all of meditation is simply making room for another. Now, what does that mean? Another experience, another dimension of our lives, another dimension of ourselves, making room for that. Because when we do stabilize and steady our hearts the way we practice in this work of being mindful and coming back to the present moment, as we do over and over again, when we do this, we just see the cyclical nature of experience, which really does mirror the cycles of our lives. And when we see this, it can help us. It can just help us remember, oh, okay, this is what, this is the truth of our life. This is the truth of how it is. And so in the light of this, how do I most, you know, what's most important, and how do I most want to live? I want to tell you a couple of just brief stories from the retreats that Catherine and I led, all those for many, many years. And these retreats, by the way, are still being led by a wonderful nurse named Suzanne Smith, who's one of our teachers at InsightLA. And they're still going on 4 times a year. So if you're a healthcare professional of any kind who works by the bedside of those who are critically ill and dying, and of course that's more and more people now today with the pandemic, these retreats are a great place to share experiences that you really can't talk about when you come home from work at the family dinner table or at a gathering with friends. You know, the topic of death and dying is pretty taboo in our culture. You know, before I began to teach those retreats, I actually visited the pediatric intensive care unit at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, just so I could get a sense of what it was like there. And it was, death is so real there. I remember walking into a room and seeing this little 6-month-old baby in her crib, and she was clearly dying. But she had this tiny little smile on her face, and she was just staring at her mother, who was leaning over her crib, speaking Spanish and reciting prayers to her. The children, they're either with a nurse, a parent, or they're alone at night. And so many of them die in the arms of the doctors and nurses and the therapists, everybody who takes care of them on those teams. And one story that I want to share with you was told by Bill. He's a nurse who says, I was with a kid who was dying. There were a bunch of nurses in the room when he started to hemorrhage. We had a new nurse who really didn't know what his role was to play. So he went up to the boy and stroked his forehead and spoke to him, saying, it's okay. It's okay. We're here. Afterward, I went up to that new nurse and I told him I was so touched by what you did. If I were dying and all these nurses and doctors were rushing around my room doing this and doing that, I would love to think that at least one person would take the time to talk to me and comfort me. And then Bill went on to say, he said, you know, now whenever I'm with a kid who's dying, I always remember this is a sacred moment. It's an honor to be here. It's a privilege. I might be the last person that this child ever sees before they die. And I want this moment to be meaningful for them as well as for me. So he was including himself in that circle of loving awareness. And also the stories that we would hear over and over again, all of them really showed that in the end, making room to talk about it, making time to hold a hand, to listen to somebody, that in the end, being present is the most important gift that any of us can give to those who are sick or dying, and to ourselves for that matter, and to ourselves. And I guess one of my favorite stories too was about a boy, a young boy. He was, I think, maybe just 13, and he said that he was dying, but he said he wanted, after he died, he wanted his whole team to announce over the PA system of the hospital that he had left the building. And his nurse, with her eyes sparkling, smiled and told us they did it. They honored it. The team came and announced to the whole hospital, ladies and gentlemen, so-and-so has left the building. What an extraordinary boy to have that kind of sense of humor and the wisdom, the equanimity to be at peace with his own death that way. And this is the wisdom and the equanimity that we are cultivating by facing this, by facing our mortality, by facing this truth, that death is real, that this body will be a corpse, that we know. There's so much we don't know about our futures and our lives, but this we do know. And there's no one to blame except maybe, I don't know, the sperm, the egg, the parents, whoever gave us birth for this happening to us, but it will happen. And how can we be with this truth in such a way that death becomes a life coach and helps us just appreciate every moment of aliveness, every opportunity to live and love fully in this life. So I will share lots more in the times, the weeks when I teach to come. And I want to make room for another right now.
Thank you, my dear. I'm just sitting quietly, touched by what you had to say, and the images, and picturing those nurses and doctors and people coming together to share the stories that they can't tell to anyone else, or that they don't. To hear one another, because we all need that. We all need to be listened to in some deep and heartfelt way. It's part of what it means to be human. And I look at the faces in the little squares on the screen. And this is what our world has become in part during the pandemic, which is pretty wild, you know? It just is. And I also know that among us, as we're listening, and maybe we'll be speaking, some of us, that there are those of us whose brothers or sisters, whose parents, or even whose children are dying or facing death, people that we love, our dearest friends. We're aware of the war that's happening and the battles, whether it's in Afghanistan or all kinds of other places in the world. We're aware of the pandemic and so many people getting sick and getting hospitalized and many dying. We carry all of this in us. So we're talking about something that we live in the midst of. It's such a great reminder, as Trudy was saying. We are here and we will not be here while in this form. And I did the trainings like Myra tried to do and as a monk, sitting in the charnel grounds all night, watching bodies burn and visualizing my own death and keeping death as an advisor. In them, the practice was to realize that this body is not who you are. These feelings and thoughts, they rise and pass. Who you are is so much bigger than this. When I came back from my time as a monk, because I've been practicing so intensely for those years, I had a very powerful sense of stability and equanimity. And I was driving on the turnpike in Massachusetts Turnpike Freeway one day, not long after I was back, and a tractor trailer in front of me lost part of a tire, and it flew up in the air and it smashed into the window of another car, and other cars braked and started to crash. It was really a terrible and terrifying moment. And I felt myself so calm. I thought, oh, this is my time. I've practiced for this. I felt calm. Okay, maybe we'll crash and I might die, but I felt so peaceful with it. And then my body got filled with energy and grabbed the steering wheel and said, not today, and wrenched me off into the grass and the dirt on the side of the road and pulled me out so I wouldn't get in the accident. And it's as if there were two dimensions happening at the same time. That dimension of awareness, of timeless awareness that I've been training as I sat through pain and fear and longing and love and joy and hope and all those hours of meditation, but also the reality that this body doesn't want to die, that life is precious, this precious human birth as it's called. And you know this as well as I do, that we are both awareness. We're the witness. We are the loving awareness that got born into this body. We are consciousness itself. And we are also this unique and precious life. Zen Master Isa wrote a short poem. He wrote, all this world is due, so dear, so refreshing, so fleeting. And this is in Zen, it's called the dewdrop world, the mystery of things appearing for a time and then vanishing. But I want you to listen to the poem again, because it was written on the death of his 7-year-old daughter. He said, dew evaporates, and all this world is dew, so dear, so refreshing, so fleeting. And we hear the tenderness of this, and at the same time, his poetic ability as a Zen master to be the witness to it and say, this is our life. It's beautiful and it's tentative. And Trudy and I kind of turn and look at each other since we both just turned 76 and say, well, 76 is actually a pretty significant number. Like, I wonder.
Yes, and speak a little louder.
I wonder how much. I can't get any closer, thank you, because I can't read it. They wonder, here we are turning 76 and kind of reflect, well, how much longer? What do we want to do with this? Please don't do the chat. Well, it makes it pretty distracting.
Okay.
Why
don't somebody suggested we trade places?
I don't think that's going to help.
Okay.
That at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, things arise. The chat appears and it disappears. People can hear me or they can't. Yeah, it's close.
Can I bring it close? Can I bring the computer closer to you?
No. You could, but then I wouldn't be able to read this.
Okay.
We try to fix things, don't we, kiddo? You want me to be a little louder. You want everybody to hear.
I do want people to hear you. What you're saying is very beautiful.
You want it all to work.
And I do like.
So there I was thinking I'd gotten okay with death. I'd done all these practices. And then about a decade ago or so, I started to pass out and get tremors and neurological symptoms and all kinds of things that were growing worse over the weeks. And I got misdiagnosed when I went in after all the scans and all these things. And I was told I would have something that was progressive. It was going to happen quickly. My body neurologically was falling apart. And also that I would have dementia and that I'd probably be dying within that year. It was not a very pretty picture. And I thought I was sort of okay with death from all these practices. When they added dementia on top of everything else, I got really scared. Like, oh, that's not how I pictured it. How we might picture our death. Unfortunately, it was the wrong diagnosis and I'm fine, at least for now, for the moment. But I was there, I heard about it when my daughter was sitting with me. And she could see when I came out and talked to the doctor how white I'd become and so forth. And it took me some days to kind of sit with all the emotions and all the things that were there, much more intense than I had expected. And gradually came to terms with it. And then it turned out it wasn't even true, that diagnosis. I remember going to talk with Ram Dass, our dear friend, and telling the story. I said, Ram Dass, I thought, I'd sat with so many people who were dying, and I thought I was chill with death, and it's just natural and so forth. And I kind of lost it. And he just smiled. He sat back. He said, oh yeah, I've flunked the course a few times myself. And it was so cheering in some way to have him say that. It was somehow like, we're not supposed to do it a particular way. And as they say, people die in character. They die in all kinds of ways. And when I've had the privilege of being with them, sometimes gracious, sometimes in pain, sometimes angry, and sometimes very loving. But what we do know and learn in our practice, as Trudy was saying, is how to be present for it all. How to sit and be present for our successes and our failures, our longing and our love, how to be with our pain and not be so frightened of it. And gradually, there comes this profound shift of identity. The Buddha was asked by Mogarajan, who came to see him, I hear you're an awakened one. Can you answer a question for me? People always came with questions. And he went on, how is it that a person can practice so they will not be seen by the king of death? And the Buddha replied, when we do not cling to anything, try to possess or grasp anything as I or me or mine, this body, these feelings, these thoughts, when we do not possess them as I or me or mine, we shall not be seen by the king of death. And he was pointing to the fact that who you really are, and you know this deep in you somewhere, who you really are is consciousness itself born into this body. You are loving awareness, you are the witness of this life. And it's knowing this even a little bit from your sitting, from your meditation, your practice, that allows you to be with people who are frightened, who are scared, who are dying, to know something deeper. And I think of the time when I was sitting with my father, who was terrified of dying. He was a scientist, and he was in the ICU and kept watching the monitors because he helped design some of the things in the hospital. Frightened, would he die and would no one notice? And I held his hand, which mostly he didn't like, but he allowed me to. And I asked him what happened when you die. He said, you become dirt, you lose everything. And I said, well, maybe. I said, but you're a scientist. Isn't this something to learn from, to see? I said, it might happen that way, but maybe it's different. And I described the out-of-body experiences that I've had in meditation, floating out of my body, be able to look and see other places. I talked about what it was like to sit with people who are dying, who would leave and have a near-death experience and come back and say they floated out and they became light, luminosity comes. I know that from the samadhi and depth of my own meditation, from past life memories. I know it from leading past life regressions. I said, likely what will happen from all the people I've sat with and all that I've learned is that as you die, you'll float out of your body, much more peaceful. There'll be a luminosity and light. You'll realize that who you are was not this body, that who you are is consciousness. You'll feel this. There might be a life review in some way, but you'll understand in your heart completely differently. And I looked at him and I said, what do you think? He shook his head, dubiously. And I said, well, you'll have to wait and see. But remember, if it happens, I told you so. And we both laughed a little bit at it. Being in the proximity of death opens the gates between the world. It invites us into the great mystery, and even to talk about it now, to be together like this. What is it? We have this life, we are here, we will not be here, not in this world. To live in this world, wrote Mary Oliver, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your life depends upon it. And then when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. In this dewdrop world, we want to live fully. Every cell of our body wants to stay alive. And this is what matters for us. We're given this unique incarnation. And as Trudy said, the reflection, the mirror of death, the wisdom, the coach of it, says, now what? This moment arises. I remember teaching with Stephen Levine, colleague, friend, student, whose book, Who Dies, I also recommend to you. A wonderful book on understanding. And he would look out to people that were, this was during the period of the AIDS epidemic before there was medicine for HIV. The retreats were filled with a lot of people facing death, and others who were caregivers. And he said, suppose you only had one day left. Who would you call? What would you say? And why are you waiting? We know something so deep, and meditation invites us to live from this place of awareness and a kind of profound freedom of being the loving awareness. And then taking up the mystery and the beauty of our life with one another with a new tenderness and care, because it is so brief, it is like dew, it is precious. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jack. And the book that Jack recommended is called Who Dies by Stephen Levine, who happens to be Noah Levine's father. Who Dies, not by Ramdas, but by Stephen Levine. So thank you, Jack. And now we have a chance for you to speak. And if you have a question or reflection, it could be a response to what we've said or just something coming from your own life and practice. And if you raise your hand, Ava will call on you and you can unmute yourself. And just to be a little patient, because there's lots of people here, and you might want to raise your hand with the reaction button down at the bottom. Okay, we've got some hands up. Okay, I don't have to say more. Okay, so Ava, do you want to call on?
Yes, so Jessie, if you could say hello and unmute yourself so that your page will be, your square will be on the top page, and then teachers will see you.
Thanks, guys. Hi, I'm Jess, and I've been very helped by this. My family, half of it is currently in New Orleans. The other half is having trouble breathing the air in California. I've got a 6-year-old little boy, and I have found it very hard in the last year to not be afraid of death for me, death for him, the planet. I mean, and this is just in our country. We've got the fires and the hurricanes, you know. So I really appreciate living in the moment as if it were your last day, and it also just is so cyclical. And I don't know, the fear is. That's all.
Would you answer?
Yeah, would
I'm
you?
gonna move it. Yeah.
You're a mom. You're supposed to be afraid for your children. It's not wrong. You know, that's part of what it means to be a mother, is someone who loves, you know, uncontrollably. So that's the first thing, just to recognize that and honor it in some way, that it's not a mistake, or you shouldn't be afraid, or you have to get rid of it. And then you take a deep breath, you do what you can, you know, and you also reflect. We human beings know how to do this. We've been through typhoons and earthquakes and pandemics for thousands of years. We do know how to care for ourselves and the ones we love, and that's also in you as much as there is fear, there's also that deep understanding that we know how. What helps you most?
Is this a question?
Good question. Question to you, Jesse. Yes.
Honestly, right now, I think not feeling isolated. So I'm trying to come to sanghas and dharma talks and find people who are also honest about this and honest about just the fear of what do we do? None of this was in the manual.
Yes. Yeah. So reaching out, community, and then sensing yourself so you're connected, something much larger. And then sensing that we all have this question, what do we do? And there isn't a simple answer, but there's your love and your presence and the fact that we do know somehow how to survive. We've done this for so long, and you begin to trust that you have that in you. Thank you. It's not just you, you're just talking. It may be New Orleans or it may be the fires, but it's also everywhere. And so this is the tentativeness of our life. And we know how to do it. Okay, Ava, please.
Nomi, I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Please say hello so that your square will be in the front page.
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Hi. Thank you so much for this and for picking me. I'm a little bit surprised. I have a bit more of a general question. I hope that's okay. And it's about my sitting meditation practice. I feel like in terms of like mindfulness in like just everyday life and hearing my thoughts and becoming aware of them, I feel pretty like good about it. But whenever I do a sitting meditation, which isn't very often, I really, really struggle. And I guess I'm kind of like wondering, like I think I do better when I do meditation, cleaning the dishes. And I feel like I have like a critical, judgmental part of myself that's like, oh, you suck at sitting meditation. But also, I guess I kind of wanted to ask maybe like, what are your opinions on like sitting meditation versus other forms of meditation? And like, why should I try to keep doing sitting meditation over the other ones?
Yes, keep trying, definitely. Yes, because they inform each other. After all, sitting meditation is just a slice of life. It's just, we're just sitting down, but it's the same thing. It's the same life as when we're washing dishes, walking around doing other stuff. And what's difficult is that we do encounter these parts of ourselves that we generally, we set them aside, we exile them. I don't want to hear from my critical, judgmental self. I don't want to feel like a failure when I try to meditate. And the best thing to do, honestly, I think, Nomi, is to just see if you can relax, let your mind do what it does and watch it, just observe it, and see if while you're observing, you could be, I don't know if you had a kind grandmother or grandparent or somebody in your life that, had a kind of gentleness towards you. You might have to invent that being if you didn't have one. But with that spirit, just observing, not trying to concentrate so hard, not trying to focus so hard, because the focus and the concentration will actually come the easier and the more relaxed you begin to feel when you're quiet with yourself. And this is a great question that I'm glad you asked, because I think especially younger people really haven't had that much chance to be alone with yourselves because of this constant connectivity. We used to not be connected all the time. It's hard to imagine, but we had times when we really were quiet and alone. And yeah, sure, we could distract ourselves always, but do you know what I mean? It was a different, we lived in a different context, a different environment. So I think for you right now, at this point in your practice, so that you can look forward to sitting quietly with yourself instead of feeling like, oh, I'm supposed to do this and I'm not doing it. And oh my God, I'm just a mess of a failure about meditation. No, just see if you can just sit quietly with the attitude like, I actually want to learn who I really am. And I'm more than this critical voice. I'm more than the judgmental voice. I'm more than hating myself. I'm more than whatever disappointments I have with myself. I'm more than that. And I want to learn what that is. Do you see what I mean? So just approaching a little bit with a little bit of a more spacious attitude. I think you'll actually like it.
I think so too. I have a really harsh critical side.
The other thing you can do that's really helpful with that is to take a mindful self-compassion class. And I think that might be the best thing for you, so that you can begin to bring some compassion and loving kindness to yourself in a very intentional and beautiful way. We offer them at InsightLA. There are other places too, but mindful self-compassion was really begun by my friend and colleague, Chris Germer in Boston, Christopher Germer, with the researcher Kristen Neff, because he really saw just what you're talking about, how hard it is for us to sit with ourselves, and especially with that critical voice. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Louis, please go ahead and unmute yourself and say hello.
Louis, how you pronounce your name? Will you unmute yourself?
Sorry, I didn't understand. So I had a question about like surrender and acceptance, and if there was like a difference between the two, because a lot of times I'll think about, for example, let's say someone in like the Holocaust and how they can be present to like suffering and be okay with it. Are they surrendering to what's happening to them, or is it like a little bit of both? Are they accepting? Because I suffer from anxiety, so a lot of times it's hard for me to sit with the feeling of anxiety, and I'll have to do something like walk or something. And I just wanted, like, I always find the question of why things are happening to be kind of futile, because in a human world, like the laws of justice and fairness don't really matter, in my opinion, when you're talking about the divine and fate and what's happening. So I was just wondering if there's a differentiation between the two, and how you can sit with your suffering and accept it or surrender to it.
Well, I really appreciate your question, because it's something that's there for all of us. And being, anxiety is partly what's natural. And you want to somehow be able to be present and kind with it. What I feel from your question is a kind of sincerity, that you actually want to be able to show up and be present. And in that lies the answer to the question. It's almost like some part of you knows it's okay to accept the kind of feelings you have, but at the same time, there's times to turn away from it. You can notice anxiety in the body is very difficult, and your intuition to not sit so much, instead to walk, to move your body. That's exactly right for you. It's not a question of doing what, outwardly is, here's what you're supposed to do. What you're doing is listening to yourself, saying, what is it that helps me to settle down? What does it help me to be present? Oh, moving my body with some kind of tension. That worked. Sitting increases anxiety. No need to do that in your case. What else helps you? Perhaps it's going outdoors, getting a sense of space, or if there's something else. What are the things that already give you a sense of stability or trust most deeply? What things work for you?
feel like nature a lot of times, like even when we were meditating, it felt very symbolic with like the sounds that were happening, like the cicadas coming in and out. You know, if they started chirping, now they were gone. It's kind of very rhythmic. I'm also near a train station, so like train coming and going. So it's very, you know, rhythmic, and you know, just being with people I love, I feel like really centers me. So yeah.
Beautiful. Listening to sound is a great meditation. Connecting with people is absolutely critical. And somehow you're guiding yourself, and you really can trust that. Do you have anything to add, Trudy?
I think that trusting your intuition, you know what's good for you. Anxiety is horrible to sit with. I have had lots of that in my life. And I sometimes liken it to trying to sit still with poison oak or something. You know, it's like, it just is so hard to sit still with that. When you make yourself do it, actually, it will stop. But sometimes it takes a long time, actually. So, you know, if you're feeling up for it, feeling courageous someday, you might just sit down and say, okay, I am just going to sit here and see what happens. And you might practice like sitting and walking and sitting and walking, giving yourself some time and see if it dies down. But that's just an experiment for when you're up for it. In general, your intuition is alive and well. So I'm cheering you on. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's a car beeping, so I don't want to ruin everyone's ears. But thank you. That's great advice. I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, and thank you for your honesty and vulnerability in sharing that. Thank you. Really, it makes it easier for other people to do the same. And it takes a lot of courage. Yeah. Victoria, you want to unmute yourself?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. I have been the last person and the only person at the bedside of 5 beloved family members. It just happened that way. It was never planned, but it seemed like I was alone in the room with the person. And I found, and I've also been in a number of very traumatic episodes, some like what you mentioned, Jack, the avoiding the car accident. And I've noticed in all of these moments that I was ready. I was in a state of peace in being with my loved ones as they died and holding their hands and breathing with them, and watching them transition. It was the most beautiful experience I've ever had in my life. So not only but anyway, I have no fear of death. It's life. So apropos of the anxiety that was just discussed, what devastates me in the wake of the loss of these loved ones is the way that other people react, specifically other family members. And at the moment, because I was the closest one to my mother, who's the most recently passed away of all my loved ones, I've been targeted, sort of villainized by this enormous extended family, and they all cut me off. So the real death that I experienced wasn't the death of my mother. It was the death of this enormous family whom I've known all my life and loved dearly and trusted. And they've betrayed that trust, and they've been really cruel and ruthless. So I'm continuing to work hard to, for equanimity and all the immeasurables and everything. And thanks to both of you, you're major healers on that path. But I wanted to know if you had some words of wisdom about about what to do in that kind of onslaught, because I wish I could convey to these. I know that they're all in pain in some way, but they're in denial. They're grappling with things they don't want to address or something. And so is there a way I can convey this sense of peace and the beauty of the transition and the death experience as a kind of way to help people not be afraid of it and to heal? I don't know. It's sort of inarticulate. I just
being very clear. I think you're being
clear.
And I think, what you're describing, no wonder you're anxious. What you're describing is super painful, because what you're really talking about, I think, and Jack, you can add if you want, and And I'm sorry we won't get to everybody who has their hand up. I'm really sorry about that, because this is actually my favorite part, is connecting with all of you. But, people have different ways of grieving, and we live in a culture that doesn't support, that really doesn't support mourning for longer than a short period of time. I call it the snap out of it culture, and if you mourn for a long time, you're given a diagnosis of depression, but you're really grieving, and grief can take the form of anger. It can take the form of self-hatred. It can take all these forms that your family members seem to be in the grip of right now. And I'm not sure what the best thing is for you to do, maybe, but what I do know is that it isn't the moment to try and teach them. They're not going to do it. You know some things from your long practice that they don't know yet, and they're not comfortable with. And so the best I think you can do is just be as loving as you can and remind them that their mother, their sister, their daughter, whoever, whatever the relationships are, their aunt, passed away in peace. And there was a loving, tender feeling. But, just to be as loving and tender and patient as you can be. I can't imagine a whole family is going to banish you forever, really. But how long ago did your mom die?
2.5 years ago.
Oh dear, that's a long
Yeah,
time.
it's long term. I fear in the way that it might be permanent, but I mean, what is help? Yeah, no, I don't have any illusions or ideas about teaching them by no means, especially this
You
family.
have a lot of wisdom. You have a lot to share.
Well, that's what I meant. I do a lot of metta practice for them, for all of them, and I name them by name as I do the metta practice. I expand it like to include this massive tribe, but my heart breaks in a way because I feel like as much as they are so hardened, they don't see my authenticity, they don't see my sincerity, and I just feel, I don't know, it seems to me a sadness because they've increased the suffering.
It's
And
very
Do they blame you? What is, in a few words, what's the story? What they blame, it's your fault?
well, oh no, it's worse than that. It's all about control and power, and the estate. They were waiting. Yeah, they were waiting for my mother to die long before she died, for material and control reasons. And I was the innocent lamb that had no clue. And even after she died, I didn't know why they all suddenly became so villainous, because I had always trusted them. So it's one of those things, where people, they have other motivations totally.
So what you have is your own integrity. You have your innocence, but also is a certain purity of heart and your integrity, and they have to work that out in some way.
In the meantime, please include yourself in that circle of loving kindness and offer metta to yourself when you're offering metta to them. And just please don't forget yourself in all of this, okay?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I did forget myself. Thank you. Thank you
I
both
can
so
feel
much.
you're not keeping yourself in that circle of compassion, and you really need to be in the center of it.
Yeah, thank you. I forgot. I always forget.
We do. That's why we come together. That's why we do this as a group. That's why we practice communally, so we can remind each other, because we all forget. So speaking of forgetting, it's now our time, not our time to die, but our time to say goodbye for this week. And I want to remind you that there are, I don't know, Ava, will we have breakout groups today?
Yes,
Okay.
we will take about a 10-minute break, and then we will come back. So if you'd like to stay for the breakout group, please don't close out the window, just keep it open. And if you'd like to take a break, just take a break and then just come back after about 10 minutes.
Thank you. That's perfect. And I encourage people to do the breakout groups, because especially those of you who had your hands up and we didn't get to you, it's really a chance to, the breakout groups are, I don't know, maybe approximately 20 minutes, half hour at the most. But it's really a chance to share together and really, you know, help each other out with your practice.
What's
So
a breakout group? You come back and then what?
you leave your camera on, you leave your Zoom on, and you take a break, and then you come back and you will be put into a group.
Okay.
So I want to just take a moment before we say goodbye to sit for just a few seconds together. So at the end of a period of study and practice together, we have a sense of something good hopefully has happened, you know, that we've learned something or had some moment of feeling some clarity or being uplifted. And in our appreciation and gratitude, the gratitude that I certainly feel from getting to be with Jack and with all of you in this way, we make this gesture of offering the goodness of our practice, of sharing the blessing of this kind of time together with others. And we do it just, it's like a leap of the imagination, where we imagine that we're sending, you know, from our hearts to all beings everywhere, the goodness. We're sharing whatever goodness has come from this. We just share with everybody in the hopes that really all beings will find happiness and be free from suffering in this world. And that hopefully too, by being aware of impermanence, of the finiteness of this life, we can grow our sense of appreciation and love and compassion for each other. It's very tender and poignant to be a human being in this life. So thank you, everybody. You can unmute yourselves to say hi, goodbye. And I encourage you to come back in 10 minutes and Ava will put you into a breakout group.
Thanks, Trudy and Jack.
Bye,
Thanks.
all. Have a good week.
Really important.
Thank you.
Appreciate
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
very, very much.
everyone.
Bless you all.
See you next week, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh, and next week, I believe Justine will be teaching. It's perfect complement to teachings of death awareness. She's going to be teaching about desire in our practice.
Okay, thank you.
I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.